When we say the ends justify the means, are we exposing a necessary truth about human nature, or giving ourselves permission to cross lines we'd never admit to crossing? You've heard it. I've heard it. Everyone repeats it like gospel. The ends justify the means. It's the supposed signature of Niccolo Machiavelli, the ruthless mind of the Renaissance. A line so sharp, it cuts across centuries. But here's the twist. He never wrote it. Not once. The man whose name became shorthand for cunning cruelty is being framed by history itself. Think about that for a second. 500 years of human ambition, power, and politics built on a line that Machiavelli never said. So if he didn't say it, why do we all believe he did? And more importantly, who benefited from the lie? Because this isn't just a slip of memory, it's not an innocent mistake. That phantom phrase has marched across continents. It's been painted on banners, whispered in war rooms, and tattooed on corporate strategy decks. Hitler justified invasions with talk of Lebensraum. Stalin defended purges and gulags as the price of protecting the revolution. And in the corporate world, executives at General Motors in 2008 spoke of necessary restructuring as tens of thousands lost their jobs. One misquote, one ghost sentence, and entire systems of power bent their will around it. If a line Machiavelli never wrote can move armies and shape empires, what does that say about the stories we trust today? Here's the strange part. When you open The Prince, the infamous book that earned Machiavelli his dark reputation, you don't find the blunt hammer of the ends justify the means. What you find is something subtler and more complicated. He writes about rulers being judged not by their intentions, but by their results. He warns that leaders must balance virtue with survival, appearance with reality. He does allow deception and cruelty in certain situations, but not as a blank check. He constantly reminds rulers that such choices carry consequences, and that power gained through fear or betrayal can easily collapse. And that's the twist most people miss. Machiavelli wasn't handing out a free pass to trample morality. He was mapping the brutal choices of his time, and the dangers that came with them. Which begs the question, if the original text was complex and cautious, who twisted it into a slogan for raw ambition? The answer is buried not in Italy, but in England. By the early 1600s, Machiavelli's name had already been poisoned. Plays and sermons painted him as the devil's secretary, the patron saint of liars. Machiavellian became shorthand for schemer, villain, traitor, the irony. Most of the people sneering at him had never read a word he wrote. They weren't studying The Prince. They were swallowing the caricature. His reputation became a weapon, a smear campaign that outlived the man himself. And that's the unnerving realization. Sometimes the story we inherit about someone matters more than the truth they left behind. So if Machiavelli could be turned into history's villain by centuries of bad PR, what other reputations, what other truths have we been taught to take on faith? Here's where it turns dark. During the Cold War, the logic of ends over means slipped out of philosophy and into geopolitics. Coups were staged, assassinations plotted, entire regimes of terror excused under the banner of national security and the greater good. Think about that. Governments toppled, leaders executed, countries ripped apart, all under the moral cover of a shortcut Machiavelli never even wrote. And the most chilling part? Few stopped to ask if the line itself was even real. If a misquote can justify a murder halfway around the world, what else has it been allowed to justify closer to home? This is where spin takes over. Politicians know the public won't wrestle with nuance, so speechwriters shave away the complexity and feed us slogans. And what better slogan than this? 6 words that collapse centuries of debate into a cheap, brutal clarity. The ends justify the means. It's perfect because it doesn't just explain reality, and it replaces it. Once the slogan sticks, people don't quote Machiavelli's careful argument. They quote the shortcut. And that shortcut doesn't just win arguments, it wins wars. So if words can be sharpened into weapons, who's holding the blade today? From Stalin's gulags to Hitler's invasions, from Mao's purges to modern-day strongmen, the justification always sounds eerily familiar. The sacrifice is for the greater good. The blood spilled is necessary for progress. The cruelty is history's demand. Different languages, different decades, different ideologies, but always the same song. And the echo that runs beneath it? That same ghost phrase, humming like a curse. The ends justify the means. It's the oldest trick in power. Dress destruction in the costume of destiny. And once you've heard the tune, you start to notice it everywhere. Because it doesn't just live in politics, it's in the boardroom too. In 2008, as the financial crisis rippled outward, corporations like General Motors announced massive layoffs. Executives stood on stage, smiling for shareholders, while tens of thousands of employees were cut loose. They called it necessary restructuring. They called it saving the company. And if you listen closely, you'll hear the unspoken logic. A little cruelty now, for a greater future later. Except the later was often just next quarter's profits, and the necessary evil was always someone else's ruined life. Here's the jolt. In those glass towers, Machiavelli's ghost gets quoted without irony. The ends are bigger bonuses. The means are human beings. But here's the uncomfortable part. It's not just politicians, not just dictators, not just CEOs. It's us. We love shortcuts. We crave them. The phrase is seductive because it whispers a promise. You can skip the struggle, you can cut the corner, and it'll all be fine, because you're doing it for a bigger purpose. Cheat a little, lie a little, bend the rules just this once, because once you get there, it'll all be worth it, right? But deep down, we know the truth. The ends don't erase the means. The means shape the end. And every time we accept the shortcut, we carve a little more of that false sentence into the story of our lives. Picture this. A cramped airport bookstore, fluorescent lights buzzing, and on the shelf, you see the prints wedged between How to Win Friends and Influence People and 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Centuries of political turmoil reduced to a paperback with a shiny sticker that says, Self-Help Bestseller. It's funny. You almost laugh at the absurdity, but then it hits you. That placement isn't harmless. It's how ideas get stripped of context, sold as life hacks, and swallowed whole. And suddenly the joke doesn't feel so funny anymore. That's what the misquote really is, a forged signature. It looks official enough that nobody bothers to check the handwriting, and once it's stamped, it travels. It appears in speeches, in textbooks, in movies. Nobody questions it because it feels real. That's the brilliance and the danger of a fake that's good enough. It doesn't just trick you once. It rewrites the record. And by the time you realize the signature is forged, it's already everywhere. Of course, Hollywood had its turn. In movies, Machiavelli isn't a thinker. He's a mustache-twirling schemer, plotting in the shadows. The kind of villain who rubs his hands together and grins. It's lazy, it's predictable, and it works. Because millions of people meet Machiavelli through the screen, not the page. So when they hear his name, they don't think political strategist. They think bad guy. And here's the sting. Pop culture often educates more people than books ever will, which means the caricature wins. But let's make this personal. Maybe you've lived it. A shortcut that worked. You bent a rule, told a half-truth, cut a corner, and technically you got what you wanted. But the victory was hollow. Because every time you replay it in your head, there's that faint aftertaste of shame. That's when the phrase stops being abstract. The means don't disappear just because you made it to the end. They linger, and they follow you. Now scale that up, because once the mindset of ends over means becomes normal, people turn into numbers. Damage turns into acceptable losses. Until one day, it isn't abstract anymore. It's your job, your community, your child. That's the gut punch. Realizing that in someone else's equation, you might be the expendable piece. And the cruel part? They'll say it was worth it. And so the cycle repeats. New slogans, new packaging, but always the same loophole. The greater good, national interest, corporate necessity. The words change, the logic doesn't. History becomes an echo chamber, recycling the same moral blind spot under different labels. And unless we notice the pattern, the future is just the past in disguise. Because here's what the shortcut never tells you. The bill always comes due. The leader who sacrifices trust for quick power ends up ruling over suspicion. The company that lays off thousands to save profits breeds disloyalty. The person who cheats their way forward carries the weight of being found out. The ends give you a temporary high, but the means leave you with the hangover. And the hangover lasts longer than the win. So here's the question you can't dodge. If not the ends, then what? If results aren't the only measure, what replaces them? It's an uncomfortable silence because the phrase was a crutch. It gave us permission to stop thinking. But that's the challenge Machiavelli never gave us, and the one history still demands, to define what matters more than winning. Because the ends will always tempt us, but the means are who we really are. On a chessboard, the queen's sacrifice is brilliant, cold, precise, sacrificing one piece to win the game. But what happens when the pieces aren't wood and ivory but people? That's where the metaphor shatters. Because the moment you call a person a piece, you've already stripped away their humanity. What sounds elegant in strategy books sounds horrifying in real life. And the sharp realization is this: every time the ends justify the means gets invoked, someone out there is being treated like just another pawn. And here's the trick we love. We borrow morality. We quote dead thinkers so we don't have to own the choice ourselves. Say Machiavelli said it, and suddenly the weight of the decision shifts off your shoulders and onto his. It feels safe, but it's not. Because once you catch yourself doing it, quoting someone else to justify something you'd rather not admit, you realize the shield isn't protection, it's exposure. You've given away your voice, and the decision is still yours. That's why the misquote feels like Frankenstein's monster. Machiavelli didn't create it, but once unleashed, it grew legs, found a voice, and stormed out into the world. And just like the monster, it didn't stay in the lab. It ran wild. For centuries, it's been crashing through politics, business, culture, destroying far more than its creator ever imagined. It's not just a phrase. It's a runaway invention. And the damage it's done proves a truth we keep forgetting. Ideas, once loosed, don't stay tame. And that's the haunting irony. Machiavelli never said it, yet his ghost has been summoned for centuries to excuse everything from purges to pink slips. The phrase that built empires also ruined lives. So let me leave you with this. When have you seen someone justify harm in the name of a greater good? And did the end really make the means disappear? Or did it leave a mark? If this made you think, subscribe and join the conversation below. Your reflections matter here. And if you're ready for another illusion shattered, don't miss our last video, where we uncovered the hidden warning inside the phrase, "Great minds think alike."